At the local market, everyone called him the Professor. No one knew his name or where he came from. Just a homeless man named Professor. He was a man in his 40s who was allowed by the vendors to do odd jobs out of pity. To carry boxes of fruit, unload a car, clean somewhere. He did all the work with dignity, did not ask for anything. What he was given was enough for him, whether it was a small amount of money or fruit and vegetables. Everyone at the market knew that the man did not remember anything about himself. It was just that one day he was found lying with his head smashed in at the market gate. The vendors felt sorry for him, so they called an ambulance. The man was taken to the hospital, but he only remembered everything from the moment he regained consciousness at the gate, while the market vendors and, later, the ambulance doctors were bustling around. So when he was treated and discharged from the hospital, he returned to the market. It was obvious that the man understood nothing of what was going on around him, but the desire to satisfy hunger, to get dressed when it is cold, and other natural needs forced him to look for a way out. At first, the people around him made the man understand that to eat, you have to have money. And in order to have money, he had to work. In general, the professor treated everything with undisguised surprise and interest, like a child learning about the world. By the way, they called the man Professor because of his predilection for finding a source of information everywhere. Whether it was a magazine forgotten by a market visitor or a piece of newspaper thrown by someone else. And if he finds a book, that's a real treat for the professor. He lived just outside the market in an abandoned shack that had miraculously survived on a vacant lot. Local homeless people accepted the new tenant on the condition that he would bring all the money he earned to them. The homeless man had nowhere else to go, and he agreed to all the terms. And so the professor began to work part-time at the market. Everyone immediately noticed that the new homeless man was quite unusual. He did not ask customers for money. He did not run to exchange the money he earned for alcohol. And the strangest thing is that he did not drink alcohol at all. As the professor said, once he was poured a drink by his homeless neighbors to warm him up. The man immediately felt so bad that he was barely brought to his senses and was not offered any more. Barbara had been working in the market ever since her husband of 15 years left her for a young, long-legged beauty. Why would he want a 35-year-old, bored, perpetual, tired wife when there were young girls literally throwing themselves on his neck? Barbara's husband easily stepped over his wife, who with her daily, minute-by-minute support helped her husband to raise his business from the ground up, who together with him saved on everything to support her husband, who gave birth to his son, Thomas, and alone took care of the household, the son, the husband, and everything else necessary, just so her beloved spouse would not be hindered by anything. So she ended up alone with a child on the street, simply because at one time, without looking, she signed a power of attorney to her husband to manage everything that belonged to her. Barbara's husband was so dishonest that he simply used her signature to deprive his wife of everything. Finding herself on the street with a child and without money, the woman did not know what to do. There was a market near the house. With the money she had left, Barbara went to the vendor and bought groceries. The seller, who has 5 children, immediately realized that the woman was in trouble. "Excuse me, are you all right? Let me help you." "Thank you, I'm fine," replied the woman, and suddenly cried, holding her little son, who was bravely comforting his mother. "Oh, Mom, don't cry. I'm strong. I'll help you. It's okay." And he himself almost cried. Then the salesman simply offered, "I can see that things are bad for you. My name is James. I can offer you a job with me. I just need a salesman. If you don't know how, I'll teach you. Do you even have a place to live?" "No," Barbara said through her tears. "Well, I have acquaintances. They went abroad for a few years. You can stay in their apartment for a while. But you must be quiet and orderly. The pay is not much. If you work, it will be enough for you. No need to thank me. I warn you right away, my job is hard. From then on, Barbara worked for James, trying to somehow feed herself and her son. Barbara had noticed the professor from the first days he appeared at the market. So different was he from the usual homeless man that the woman tried to help him in some way, without insisting or wanting to offend him. She would ask him to move something, move it, which was completely unnecessary, and then she would feed him with food brought especially for the professor from home and talk to him for a long time. The professor turned out to be an interesting conversationalist, often staying near Barbara's tent and occasionally escorting her home, helping her carry grocery bags. But no matter how many times Barbara offered to come in and have dinner with her, the man invariably refused and went back to his cabin to sleep and be at the market again the next morning. In the time Barbara and the professor became so close that the woman introduced him to her son, Thomas, Thomas was delighted with the professor. All day long, while Thomas was at his mother's market, the professor was by his side. The man was beginning to feel an unreasonable affection for the boy. They were so good together. Thomas showed the professor how to use the telephone, told him what the internet was, and taught him the simplest things the professor couldn't remember. In turn, the professor would tell the boy what he had read about in the next newspaper or magazine, and they would all discuss it together. Barbara was pleased with her son's friendship with the professor. Yes, he is homeless, but after all, Barbara and Thomas are the same. Living in someone else's apartment was only thanks to James. Thanks to him, of course, but things can change at any time. If her own husband kicked her out after 15 years together, a stranger doesn't have to give her a place to live her whole life. One day, when her son had spent a long time with the professor, and Barbara was especially tired, she simply ordered them both, not feeling strong enough to do anything else, to go home immediately. They walked through the dark. Suddenly, sloppily dressed, drunken boys appeared out of the darkness. They immediately found an object of humiliation when they saw the homeless man. "Oh, who's the dirty one here? Isn't it time for you to wash up? Do you want us to wash you ourselves? With blood?" The cheeky boys, sensing the impunity and fear of Barbara and Thomas, became even more pestering. "What's this? Our homeless man also has a woman and child? Oh, that's not right. Such creatures should not live. Now we're going to correct all this injustice." And one of the drunken boys stretched out his arms toward the boy. All that happened in the next seconds, numbed with fear, Barbara saw as if she were watching some action movie. Suddenly the professor grabbed one of the guys by the arm. He fell down and remained lying there. The second guy pounced from the other side and ran into the professor's leg and kicked him in the neck. The same fate befell him. Then the third guy, seeing what had happened to his friends, made a new argument, a knife. Inexplicable movement of the professor, and the guy is already lying with a broken arm. Then the professor turned to Barbara and Thomas, threw out the confiscated knife, and said as if nothing had happened, "Shall we go?" Thomas was ecstatic. "Professor, how did you do that?" "I don't know, Thomas. Somehow it just happened by itself. I saw it, and then my hands and feet worked by themselves." "I know what it was," Barbara said. "It's called muscle memory. Apparently in a past life that you don't remember, you had some kind of skill, maybe martial arts." Suddenly Thomas stopped. "Mom, I want the professor to live with us. He saved us, and he doesn't have a place to live. This isn't right." Barbara sighed, looking at the professor. "I know, son. I keep inviting. Only for some reason the professor won't even come over to visit us." Thomas looked questioningly at the man. "Why won't you want to visit us? Don't you like us?" The professor looked at Barbara confusedly. "I care for you very much. Believe me, I'm attached to you. But I don't even know my name, who I am. What if I'm a criminal? I can't put you in danger." Barbara took him firmly by the hand and said, "No, there were criminals and you saved us. Don't even say no. Come to us." From that time on, the professor came to live at Barbara's house. They went to work together, came back together. The man helped Barbara all day long. The professor and Thomas spent their evenings discussing the next task. As it turned out, the professor was good at internet programs, quickly understood the point, and was already explaining everything to the boy himself. The man himself did not understand where he got his knowledge from. He just understood. He just knew. Barbara became very attached to this strange man. He became a part of her life. She felt that the very chemical reaction between them that is called love was taking place. The woman felt that this poor homeless man, this professor with no name or destiny, was as necessary to her as air, and she saw a reciprocal reaction. But for some reason, the professor was in no hurry to reveal his feelings. One day, Barbara suggested, "Look, you can't be the professor all the time. Let's try to remember your real name." "How am I supposed to remember it?" Well, we'll try. I'll call out names and you listen. Maybe you'll be able to remember your name." So, Daniel, Mark, Brian, Timothy, Jose, Frank. The professor did not respond to all the names spoken. That's when Thomas got involved. "Eric, Jerry, Gregory, Alex, Leo." Suddenly, the professor flinched. "Leo? Is there such a name? I thought it was a beast, but something about this beast reminds me." Thomas and Barbara cheered, and the boy held out his hand to the professor. "Let's meet Leo. I'm Thomas." The professor didn't mind. He liked the name. Life went on. Barbara also went to work at the market. Leo went with her. At times, Barbara thought that this was the happiness of women. They had survived so much, they deserved the best. But there was still one problem. Leo was still homeless, and even the name, which somehow seemed familiar to him, might have been just a false memory. He still remembered nothing of his past, and yet he and Barbara and Thomas were already a family. In order to officially live together, the man had to get documents, a passport at least, and it was not easy for a man with no memory or past to do that. As luck would have it, James also announced that his relatives were due to return, and soon Barbara would have to vacate the apartment. Things are bad, Barbara realized. Something had to be done. In the evening, the woman gathered her favorite boys in the kitchen and announced, "My good ones, I have some bad news. We're moving out of this apartment. I really don't know where we're going to live. I'll try to borrow money from James. I think he won't refuse me. We'll rent an apartment, but there's still the problem of your papers, Leo." "I understand, but you know I don't know anything about these things. I don't know much about anything as far as life goes. I don't even know who I am." James loaned Barbara some money, and she rented an apartment. One day, Barbara took Leo and Thomas to the mall to buy the essentials. The three of them walked down the hall, looking at all the departments. Leo and Thomas fooling around, joking and laughing. Barbara stopped them all the time with a laugh. Suddenly the professor stopped and froze. He seemed to be out of breath, turning pale, and gasping for air as if he could not breathe, while he was staring straight ahead. Frightened, Barbara followed the frozen gaze of Leo. Not far from them, near a boutique with lingerie, was a gorgeous young blonde, talking about something with an elegant man. "Who is that? Why do you look like that?" she asked worriedly. The professor suddenly covered his face with his hands and sat down on the step. He just sat swaying from side to side without saying a word. Suddenly Leo pulled his hands away from his face and Barbara saw that he was crying. "Barbara, I remember everything. That girl," he pointed to the blonde. "That's my wife. And next to her is my comrade. They wanted to kill me." "Leo, calm down. Honey, are you sure?" "I'm sure. My name is Leo. I'm the director of an internet innovation firm. I'm rich. I'm very rich." Barbara immediately believed the professor. Although he was no longer the professor, he is now a very rich man. And she, who is she? A market saleswoman with a son, plus no money and no place to live? "Leo, you should probably talk to your wife. Mind your own business. Get your life back. We'll be okay." The ex-professor nodded, as if he heard nothing, and went in the direction of his wife. Barbara only heard the first phrase. "Well, hello, Mia. Hello, Walter. Weren't you expecting to see me alive?" And she left at once, grabbing her son by the hand, pulling the stubborn Thomas through his tears, not answering any questions, only repeating like a wound-up girl, "It's over, son. It's over." Every morning, Barbara automatically got out of bed, picked up her son, and sent him off to school. She would get herself cleaned up and go to work. For 8 hours she stood at the market, smiling and weighing goods. She went back to the rented apartment and cooked for her son. The hardest part was when Thomas asked questions. "Mom, where did the professor go? Mom, did he leave us?" Barbara could not answer her son's questions. She understood that the homeless professor turned out to be a very rich man, and that when he saw this beautiful girl, his wife, he left, without even saying goodbye. "Son, the professor has his memory back. He's going to be very busy now." 2 weeks later, Thomas met his mother outside the market, picked up the packages, and offered to walk home across the park. "Mom, you look so tired. Let's take a walk. Have some ice cream, sit on a bench in the park." Barbara, indifferent, agreed. She and Thomas were sitting on a park bench, and her son was telling her about the news from school. Barbara nodding and trying to act interested. Suddenly, someone in a familiar voice said, "Barbara, Thomas, would you like to spend the evening with me?" Barbara turned around with her heart pounding hard and saw Leo, a handsome, lavishly dressed, confident, rich man. He stood in front of them and smiled so naively, like a boy. "Hooray!" Thomas shouted at the top of his voice. "The professor is back! Mom, shall we go with him? Look how handsome he is! Leo, are you really rich?" "I am. Take your mother's hand. She looks confused," laughed the professor. Barbara stopped her son. "Wait, son. Leo is a very busy man now. He's got a family, a business. He doesn't have time for us. You understand, Leo? I'm not going to let you play with us so that Thomas will miss you when you have other toys. Once a professor, now a CEO. Sorry, we have to go. Thomas has school tomorrow, and I have to get up early for the market. James warned me that the goods will be delivered in the morning." Barbara turned around, took her hushed, uncomprehending son by the hand, and walked toward the exit of the park. Her heart was beating frantically. Her eyes went dark. The tears flowed continuously. Barbara did not even try to wipe them away. It was over. "Barbara, stop!" said Leo. "You helped me when I was a nobody, when they called me professor. And now that I remember my name and who I am, you're abandoning me? Do I deserve to be treated this way?" Barbara stopped and slowly turned to Leo. "But you, as soon as you saw her and remembered everything, you left right away. You abandoned us. We're nothing to you now." "Silly girl," said Leo affectionately, and went over and hugged Barbara and the boy. "What a silly girl you are. I could not come to you until I had dealt with everything. It wasn't just my wife and comrade, I remembered. I remembered how I once found out that they were lovers and were stealing from me together. I told them that I was breaking off my marriage to my wife and that I was firing my comrade. Then they waited for me to come out after work and hit me on the head. They thought I was dead, so they threw me in front of the market. That's where they found me. But I survived, and I figured it all out. I'm even grateful to those traitors for what happened, for it was only when I was professor that I found people who loved me unselfishly, as I am, even without a memory. And I can't imagine my life without you and Thomas. You are my family." "That's great. You're so solid now," exclaimed Thomas. "Are you going to come visit us in your fancy car now?" "No, Thomas. In a fancy car, I'm going to take you to your new home. Just ask Mom. Will she marry me?" Almost all the market vendors were invited to the wedding of the professor and Barbara. Almost all the market vendors were invited to the wedding of the professor and Barbara, who were sympathetic and understanding towards Leo and Barbara. Most of all, James was genuinely happy for his former saleswoman, and the same salesman who mocked the couple, humiliating their feelings with insults. They all mentally cursed their unhappy fate, scolding themselves for not seeing in a homeless man the opportunity to provide for their future. And they watched other people's happiness with envy. Soon Thomas went to a new school near his home, and the adored wife of the wealthiest businessman, Barbara, was preparing for the birth of their daughter.